Okay, so first of all, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Jason Beckford, and I'm the founder and head coach of Cayman FC. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We've got a very special guest with us in the series of webinars that we're doing for parents on the island. This is Stephen Torpey. Stephen is the academy director for Brentford FC in the Premier League, and they're a Category 1 academy. I'm going to leave things for Stephen to kind of open up and tell us a little bit more about his background. But his background's extensive, over 22 years of coaching experience. Coached at Liverpool, and head of coaching at Manchester City FC as well. So I think today you're going to get a really good insight of not only player development, but also coach development and how you as parents can help with regards to, making that pathway or navigating that pathway of, should we say, youth development in world football. So without further ado, Steve, how are you? How's the weather in England?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm great. I think the weather in England's really good right now, but not as good as where you guys are, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a
but
little
we'll take
warm.
it. We'll take that at the moment. Sun's shining and the rain is staying away.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, Steve, if you don't mind, then just to live, I just give a little snapshot of your career, but just talk us a little bit through about how you've ended up at Brentford FC.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'll probably spend a few minutes just talking about me and my journey really, and
Sure.
before I arrived in Brentford. I mean, first and foremost, what I always like to share with people is that I'm a dad. First and foremost, I'm not a coach. First, I'm a dad. First, I'm a partner. First, I've got 4 children. We're a blended family, so I've got stepchildren as well as my own biological daughter. And the reason I probably tell you that is because one of my stepsons is actually in the academy system himself, and he's trying to cut his way in the game. He's made first team debut at Sunderland. He'll be moving and changing clubs at the end of this season. And I always like to share that because I not only am I on this side of the screen trying to offer advice, I suppose, to some parents, but I also go through daily what you guys would go through with your own children, especially from a sporting and elite sporting perspective. And it's challenging and it's emotional and it's a roller coaster. So I fully appreciate everything that you guys go through because I'm living that as well. Um, and then also, I suppose from my football and career background, I was in the academy system myself as a youth player. I was very fortunate enough to play for my boyhood club in Liverpool, who I supported, and then I was again fortunate to be selected for the FA National School. I know, Jason, we spoke about this before about the
Mm.
similarities of your pathway and my pathway, and how we both attended that same school, and how important that was for our journey because that was the elite, or so to speak, elite players in the country at that time. There was a selection process. It was 4,000 players whittled down to the top 16 in the country, so to speak. And that was an unbelievable experience for me to go into boarding school at the age of 14, spend 2 years representing my country and trying to learn about the game. And then again, after that sort of experience ended, I went back to my parent club in Liverpool and was fortunate enough to become a young professional player at the Liverpool Football Club until the age of 19. And my career took a complete U-turn in terms of from the age of 19, I would go from being a youth international at 16 to 19 years of age, playing for your boyhood club as a professional, not quite making the grade into the Premier League or first team, but then after that, finding it very difficult to find another football club. So um, I had a choice what to do, whether to continue on that journey, trying to make my way in the game, or do I turn my hand to something else and try a new career? And that's what I did. I started coaching at that point. Um, I started coaching just locally in schools, in high schools, primary schools in the UK, just trying to earn a living really. And what I did then was play semi-professionally at the same time as learning how to be a coach. And at the time, it was really disappointing for me. I felt I was finding my way, not quite knowing what I was going to do in life. But actually, in hindsight and looking back, that gave me the head start in my current career, which was coaching, and it was something that I had a real passion for. In 2008, I got an opportunity to join Liverpool as a coach. So I went back to my old stomping ground, so to speak, as a player. And it was only then really did my mind start to open to all the reasons why maybe I was unsuccessful. You know, I was thinking about how did I dedicate myself to the career that I wanted? How did I cope in adversity? And was I resilient enough? And did I really use all the tools that were given to me at that time? And a lot of those answers were no, really. You know, when I could look at it through the coach's lens. I spent 5.5 years in Liverpool in a range of coaching roles, some part time, some full time, working across multiple age groups. And then I had a moment where, you know, the sliding doors moments where I had an opportunity to join another club, and everything was going well for me at Liverpool, where I'd been for all my life as a player, for part of my life as a coach, and I had the opportunity to join Manchester City, which was an unbelievable project that they were starting with the opening of a new facility and an ambitious club, as you guys will all know. And I took that decision to join Manchester City. It was a tough one. I remember going to my sister's birthday a few months later with all my family who are Liverpoolians and Liverpool fans, and I'm dressed in a Manchester City kit. But I took that opportunity, and I think, you know, hindsight again would tell me that it was the right choice, because I was there for nearly close to a decade. Again, in a range of different roles. In the last 5 years, I became the head of coaching at Manchester City, which meant I was responsible for the implementing of the coaching program. I was responsible for the coach development program and the succession planning of our coaching team, and also, even more importantly, was responsible for the player development pathways and the transition into the senior game at the latter years of my time in Manchester. And it was amazing. I was so fortunate to be in all of these elite environments to date. You know, as the FA National School, as Liverpool as a player, Liverpool as a coach, and then Manchester City, where I was just in rooms with people far more advanced than me, just listening and rubbing shoulders and taking notes and jotting things down all the time. And literally, and I use this phrase a lot, is just stealing and adapting to become who I want to be. And I'm a big believer in that. I don't shy away from that. You know, I've not really invented anything in my life. I've just grabbed something from somewhere, put my own spin on that, and tweaked it and fine tuned it. And that got me into this opportunity now, where I am, where I joined, you know, about 16 months ago now, to Brentford as the academy director. We've got a very exciting project. We're relaunching the academy in the heart of London. We're the only Premier League club to not have an academy at that point that was open and operational. So I got an opportunity to go to take the blank canvas, to put my own stamp on things, and it's a challenge that I relish, and I feel very privileged to have been given that opportunity to lead the academy here in Brentford. So yeah, that's a sort of whistle stop tour of my career. I thought there's a number of things in there that were interesting. I suppose the only other bit that I've missed out of that is that my qualifications as a coach. You know, I'm an A licensed coach with the UEFA qualifications, and I also I've gone down the sort of FA route of the Advanced Youth Award. So again, I'm qualified to the Advanced Youth Award level, a UEFA A licensed coach, and I've also later on in life gone back to school and completed a couple of degrees in a number of things, and to do with coach development and you know, Premier League initiatives, and they've been fascinating for me because they've enabled me to continue learning and growing, which is really important to me. And I'm currently sitting on my sporting directorship masters right now, so lots going on for me, always busy. But yeah, I thought that was a good way to open up, just to give a full context of my career today and why I'm sat here.
Not brilliant, Steve. Thank you for that. And it just goes to show just to what, you know, that pathway of, you know, going from player to coach and how long it is, but also as well, all those things you pick up along the way that actually shapes you into the coach that you are today, or you're thinking as well in terms of what it is you're doing. So, you know, just given that, I mean, obviously you touched on it as well when you were talking, and obviously you're a person that, you know, is open to learning. You're still learning to this day. You know, you're doing a master's, if you like. You're picking up information as you go along. You know, you kind of stealing or whatever it is, or adapting, I should say. And that's what we all do as coaches. We see something, we say, "Oh, right, I like that." Put a
Mhm.
different spin on it, or whatever it is. We all do that as coaches. But I wanted to just just along with what you said, and a quote that I saw from you as well, which I thought, obviously would probably a nice segue into what you're actually trying to do now at Brentford, given that basically, you got a blank canvas and, you're the top person there now. But I think you said something here. So this is along the lines of academy, your philosophy, your approach says about Brentford FC, since you've been there, you said that we want to be admired as the most caring and progressive football academy in the world. So straight away, as a player or as a coach, as a parent,
Mhm.
my ears prick up straight away because you've actually talked about caring straight away, where people might have thought about, okay, the football bit, but you've talked about being in a caring and progressive academy. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more then, Steve?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, my sort of 10 years in Manchester, you start to get to that point where you start to think about what comes next. And what I did about 12 months before I actually moved clubs is I started just thinking about, okay, so where's my career going to go next? What do I want to do? What do I want to be part of? So I started to make notes on the academy that I would want to be part of and run. You know, if I had a blank canvas, unlimited resources, what would it be that I would want to do? And I'm very fortunate. I've got some mentors that I work closely with, and one mentor in particular speaks about purpose all the time. He says, everything starts with purpose. So isn't our mission. It's our purpose. It's my purpose. So as an academy director, my purpose is to deliver this. And initially, when I wrote the purpose as it was actually to be recognised as the most caring and progressive football academy in the world, because that's the thing I wanted to be striving towards. And actually, from speaking to a mentor again, a guy called Kevin Roberts, and he's really really amazing guy. He just said, "Yeah, it's good, but change recognised to admired." He said, "Everyone wants to be admired." So. This is why I like to speak openly about it, because with admiration, you have to talk about it. People have to know about it to be admired. And the sort of best way of me summarizing this is I'll never know if we've got that admiration, and there's not going to be a measure for that, but we should always be striving towards achieving it. And that'll mean that we will never get complacent. We will always keep striving towards gaining that admiration. And the thing that I hope will happen one day in the future, and someone tells me this, is that somebody somewhere, maybe in the Cayman Islands, are just having a conversation around a coffee, and they say, "I wonder who's the most caring academy in the world," and immediately that the individuals go, "That's Brentford." And that will be something that we'll know about, but the only way we can do that is through action and through reputation speaking for itself, and the things that we do in order to make that stand to be caring. And then the progressive element of our purpose is because in order for us to be the best, we can't follow the trend. We're not able to do that. We don't have the same resources as our neighbours. We don't have the same resources as some of our other clubs, and we want to do things differently. The football club has been built on that. They've done an unbelievable job so far at first team level. To be in the Premier League from the lower divisions, and to become a credible, well established, well run club. And we've got to do the same as an academy. So the two things go hand in hand. And ultimately, when we talk about caring, that doesn't mean just everything is nice and fluffy and rosy and all these other things, because this is an elite environment. So it's hard. It's a measurable environment. It's assessment environment. We do have to have difficult conversations at times to say that that we don't think this environment's going to be for somebody, and there's another environment that may be well suited for their development, and we have to do our retain release meetings and so on and so forth. But it's how you handle those meetings, and it's what you do leading up to them, how clear and honest and open you are about it, because nobody enters into the elite system expecting to be there forever. The families and the people we work with, and the young boys and the young people, they know all of this when they begin. So we don't hide behind this. We don't sell the dream. We talk about it openly. Honestly, I did our under eights meeting this morning to welcome them to the club, and I talked about the only guarantee is that this will end. The academy system will end, but we talk about that from day one and say that it will end, but hopefully it will end because you move into the first team and your academy days will be over. Hopefully you move into somebody else's first team and your academy days will be over. or potentially you might move on from the football club at a point, but we've given it everything together, you know, and we've tried to find different paths to where we want to get you as an elite young man. And if that's the case and it doesn't quite work, then as long as we can look back with fondness, real amazing memories and an experience that's been second to none, we call it the bees experience, then actually we can all be happy about that because we've entered in, we've had a great time, we've got memories that last a lifetime, we've got friendships that will hopefully last a lifetime. We were speaking about that at our national school days with the other day.
Yeah.
Like, you've got a chat still with people from I don't know how many years ago. Mine's from 25
Yeah.
plus years ago. There's
I won't tell you how long my mind was,
I
mate.
was
I
being
know.
kind, Jason. I was trying to
Yeah,
be kind.
thanks for that. Well, we were the first. That's what I'll say. So people can do the maths from there.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, look, that's the point, isn't it? That I look back with fondness on my experiences, and I want to try and create that academy and deliver that academy that does that. I mean, on our purpose, and we have a purpose which I've explained, but we also have a purpose on a page that breaks down how that comes to life. And our focus in the academy is to shape tomorrow today. And we
Mm,
talk about this. So, what are we doing today that's going to shape the youth of tomorrow? And that
yeah,
is bigger than football. That is a lot bigger than just kicking a ball on some grass and trying to win
oh,
some games.
yeah,
So our staff have all been recruited knowing that that's our focus, and they buy into that from day one. Otherwise, they wouldn't be joining us. And then we have a spirit which is yes, we can, and no
right,
one's going to tell us that we can't. You know,
right.
we've already done some remarkable things this year, and we're going to continue to do that.
Right. No, I mean, just going on from that as well, so you're obviously in a really competitive market there in, South, sorry, you're in West London, aren't you, with Brent, but you're in the London area.
Mhm.
Obviously coming from the northwest of England, where another area of England that's very saturated with professional clubs. How does it differ between, or is there any difference between Brentford and the other clubs in the London area, but also as well, giving your experience from Man City as well, in the northwest, and then going to the southeast? There, what's been the difference, or the most the thing that's kind of stands out to you as being the difference between those
Yeah.
areas?
It, you know, London, northwest of England, like you say, is so many clubs in those areas. So it's it is competitive. I suppose the difference has just been the way we've approached it. So because we've had a blank canvas, as I said before, we've been able to make decisions that we haven't been locked into from historical decisions. So if I give an example, um, we at Brentford have merged our age groups together. So because we started from the beginning, we want to be caring, and we didn't want to recruit players just for the sake of bringing players into the building, because we would have known that down the line there's a good chance that we would have had to release players because of that. So we went with less is more, and we went with smaller groups. And what we do for training is we merge our under nines and our under 10s together. We do the same with our 11s and 12s, the same with our 13s and 14s, the same with our 15s, 16s. So actually, we reduce our squads from 10, the normal academy would have, to only 6 squads, but we keep the same staffing levels. And that was because we want to have attention to detail, because we want to make sure that we give all that care we talk about every day.
Right.
And it's very hard to do that when you have got a lot of players for the ratio of coaches. So we wanted to try and reduce that ratio.
So, Steve, can you just again just break that down a little bit for us? So we're doing a similar thing here already at Cayman FC, where we've kind of banded it. So our U10s would be a collection of U9s and
Yeah,
U10s, if you
that's
like.
right.
We brought them
Exactly.
to. So you're talking about your training environment then being
We do
bio-banded
that.
like that,
Yeah.
and your
So
games program might be U9s, U10s still like that. Is that the case?
sort of. I'll explain a bit more
Okay.
how we do it a bit differently for games. So,
Right.
yes, exactly like that for training, exactly like that. So we would age band them. So one of the things that, again, if I look back to previous, you would get one season with a group, with a squad, as a coach, as a head coach, and
Yeah.
often what you do is you just get to a great point where they know you, you know them, and then you hand them over. And you
Yeah.
hand them to somebody else, and what happens is they do they inherit. They spend 2 to 3 months getting used to the players again and familiar, building up the rapport. You do another 3 months of really good work, and then you reap the rewards of that 3 months later, and then you hand them over again. So
Right.
we decided to do that dual banding for that reason. That was one of them. But round the games program, how we work is we work differently on games. So our theory around games is we don't talk about up or down age groups. We talk about across. So
Okay.
any given Saturday or Sunday or whenever the games are, your player, your boy could play across age groups. And an easy way to explain it is this: if we were playing against Cayman FC
Yeah.
tomorrow
Yeah.
and your son was 11, if your son was playing against in our under 11 team with against Cayman's under 11's side, the likelihood is there's a smile, everyone's fine, we're all okay.
Right.
If you were playing for our U10s against Cayman's U10s, there's likely to be a frown, people questioning, oh, why is that? Why is my son playing in this age group? And if you were playing in the under 12s, that's where the Instagram posts come because my boy's the next big thing, and I'm going to be
Right.
play the best in the world. And what happens here is age. We assess performance often by age group and how that's happening and how those players are performing. But the end assessment, playing in a first team, is not age banded. So what we look at is the appropriate challenge on the weekend,
Mm.
depending on our opponent, depending on where the player is at, depending on how their growth and maturation is at this point. What is their injury status? What is their technical level? How do the opponent play? What do they challenge us like? And we take all these considerations into the equation, and then we make the decision on where we think the best fit is for that player to play on the weekend,
Right.
depending on what we've got ahead of us and depending on the individual development plan for that boy. So if he needs stretch, then we might stretch. If he needs to have pressure relieved, we may do that because it isn't an age specific test every single week. We don't need to do that. We believe this. This is our beliefs that we don't need to do that. We just have to find the appropriate challenge on
Right.
any weekend or any game day that
Right.
can support the continued development of that individual.
No, I mean that's fantastic because as we we both know, it's very rare that you play at your own age, do you? If you're a talented player, it's very rare that you play at your own age, so you do need that stretch, as you say. But if things are, I like the your phrase when you're saying you're kind of relieving that pressure a little bit, you may well be a U11, but maybe you're playing in a U10
Yeah.
environment, and just that wording, we're actually saying rather than I mean, it's just there, isn't it? Just by the words, parents do get upset when you say, "Okay, your son's playing down." All of a
Mhm.
sudden, it kind of gets kind of put into it's a demotion when actually
Right.
it's not a demotion. We're just saying this is what it is. So as soon as you
Right.
start saying you're playing across,
Yeah.
there's a different mentality straight away, isn't there, from a parent's perspective? And is that the reason why you've done it as well?
Absolutely. We take away every decision is neither positive or negative. It's us that decide whether it
Mm,
is. So we're trying to take that away to help our families relax and have trust in us and talk in a language that can support that. So we don't want any positive or negative connotation to go to the decision. We
right.
we really want that. I mean, look, this year we've had boys who have played 2 years younger than their chronological age. But
Right.
the reason is because
Physicality.
the reason is their biological age is
Right.
that age.
Right.
So you can look at chronological age, you
Hmm.
look at biological age,
Yeah.
like the biobanding of that player, the growth rate. You could look at the technical age of a player. You can look at the cognitive age of the player. Somebody's really mature in their ways, and some others are immature. And
Mm,
the immature player could be physically 6'5", but immature. I saw a boy playing for another club yesterday, and I saw exactly the same. Looked quite immature, but looks like a big frame and physique.
mm,
And actually, I'm just hoping that the club he's at and the players start to appreciate him for his innocence rather than expecting him to be a first
right.
team player now because he's got this presence.
Yeah.
So there's so much to take into account. And it's almost like remember the old stereos of the graphic equalizers, and you move them down.
I don't even care. Don't
Yeah.
hit on that topic. You know what I mean?
Well, that's But that's it, Jason. That's how you need to be looking at individuals. Nobody's the same, so
Yeah,
we have to try and plan for the difference. We have to
yeah,
understand the difference, appreciate the difference, recognize what potential is, recognize why someone may be performing well today or underperforming today. I've got so many examples of that we've got
mm.
this year that are just fascinating to hear.
No, I mean it's a really good conversation because I'm just thinking now then, Steve, what does it what does given what you've said already, what does a Brentford FC player look like than an academy player? So if I'm walking down the road, if I just pop my head into your academy, like can I just go, yeah, that's a Brentford FC player, or what is it that you're looking for, or
You wouldn't notice. You wouldn't
right?
notice
Okay,
because to see one of our players, and I got asked this when I was joining the club, and that was one of the questions I got asked by my
right,
sporting director.
right,
Okay, you're gonna bring the academy and you're gonna start this academy. What would a typical Brentford player look like? And I said, well, you
mm,
wouldn't have one. It would be all shapes and sizes. So
right,
we need to be open and work well for the physical early maturer that needs teaching around the game and needs
right,
teaching technically and tactically. We're also welcoming the late developer and the physically tiny, small, light, slight, technically gifted, intelligent player. So we have again. I spoke about it earlier. We have our purpose on a page, and we have 8 beliefs. And one of our beliefs is number 7 is we believe in the power of the outlier, in diversity in thought and spirit. So that's a belief that we
mm,
live by with our staff, and um, that means it can look different for everybody. And another one of our beliefs is, you know, we we believe that every young player is unique and has a different route into first team football, and that we must find the path together. Because
right,
when you have difference, when you have that difference, which again, I'm just flicking across there to get the language right. I've got it on my screen there. Is that
mm,
when you work like that, the expectations of the families need to differ, and realize that your son is on their own unique journey, their own path. But if we are open and we have that dialogue together, we can try our best collectively, collaboratively, to help them on that journey to get to where they need to be at the pace they need to do it.
mm. That's is that a problem there? Is that the conundrum that you have to figure out now as a club, in that you say that's at your own pace, but yet still we all both know as a football club, your job is to produce players, and if you're not producing players, or if you're not or you're not developing in the rate that you need to be, it could be 16 or something like that, and you've got to make a decision of whether you're gonna, it's gonna be, is that person gonna be a scholar or not.
Mhm.
Is it going to be a leap of faith for you, or are you going to think, well, listen, we can't take that chance at this moment in time? How do you figure that one out?
Well, my sort of my answer to that would be every single player is a leap of faith.
True.
Because we don't know.
No.
I was playing for England at 16. I was a
Mm,
professional at Liverpool at 19, and I was out the game by 20. So
mm,
no one would have predicted that. If you were anywhere experienced head coach, any experienced scout, they wouldn't predict that because it doesn't stack up.
right.
Likewise, we'll all know players that you didn't think were ever going to get there, and then they come through late and they're playing, and you think, "Wow, I don't know how that's happened."
Yeah.
So all of them are a bit of a leap of faith. I suppose the bit I would throw in the mix really is, and this is typical Brentford, is that we're data informed and expertise led. So those
Right.
leap of faiths and those decisions have to be calculated risks.
Mm,
So the more we can reduce that risk by gathering as much data, whether that's subjective or objective data of
mm,
on these young people. So, for example, we take the maturation status and we look at where with using the scientific methods our sports science team would use, and it's proven and tried and tested. We would look at the predicted adult height of a player. We would look at where they're at currently, and we would try to say, okay, we think there's X amount of growth remaining, and that would factor into our decision. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh, if you're big, you're going to be positive, and if you're small, it's going to be negative. Because actually, we've got a boy now who's in our under 15s.
mm,
He's bio banded now and then into the under 13s. So he's the size
right.
of our under 13s. He's not even one of the biggest players in our under 13s. He's a lot smaller.
Mm,
But I've spoke to the board about this player and said, I think we should give the scholarship to this player because we need to see what he looks like when he's 20.
Mm.
Now
Mm.
it's having the faith from your board. That was another reason for joining this club. The board are so pragmatic. The technical board, my sporting director, technical director, they're absolutely on board with doing these things because the only thing you do if you allow that player out the building is lose. That's the only thing you do. Because
Mm.
he goes somewhere else, and when he's 20, 21, he comes onto the scene and people go, why weren't we patient? Why didn't we do that? So when I had that conversation, I'm saying, look, he's 15, leave that with me. I don't need to put him on your radar at first team level till he's
Mm.
19. Just leave him with me. Let me
Right.
wrap him
Yeah.
up and put him in cotton wool and work with him and let our team work with him. And the only next time we need to really assess this is in a few years' time.
I suppose as well, though, Steve, you've got to have some successes or to have some kind of evidence-based data, if you like, to actually be able to for that, your technical board to say, yeah, okay, Steve, we're on board with that. You must
Yeah.
have kind of what's that look like to you in terms? Can you give an
Yeah.
example of,
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
But so we have a challenge basically. Greatest imaginable challenge that we have is to get 3 first team debuts in 3 years. That's in the Premier League. So
right,
again, we're striving and we're aiming for that. Now, there's a lot of other variables that come into that to happen.
of course,
We may have 10 players that we think are ready, but if our first team have no injuries and have all their squad available and are pushing for a European place like they are right now, the opportunity for our first team manager to blood that young player becomes less. And that's not his fault. That's just the way that is. Because on the flip side, the fans would want us to be in Europe. So you started putting young players into the team right now. I'm sure the fans would say, we're pushing for Europe. We need to go with tried and tested experience, and we want that.
of course,
But the point is that I'm making here is that my bosses, they don't measure it based on just outcome. They measure the input. So we have to I provide every 3 months a list of our high potential players. I look at who they are, where they're at. Are they performing well now? Are they high potential? Why do we think that? Explain why we think that. And then what we do is we track and monitor every 3 months whether they've continued on their journey. Now, all our players have this kind of scrutiny, and we look at that and we see if they're all. But you know, as you say about results, we want to know which players are potentially ready for first teamers in the future.
right,
We do this all the way through the academy, and it's just we measure our processes rather than our output. So we look at whether we're happy with the way we're working with players, developing players, because if we get that right, the byproduct will be that the performance of the players will improve. And the more
right,
that the performance of the individuals improves, the more chance they've got of then being selected by Thomas and the first team staff or other
right,
football clubs saying, we'd like to purchase that
right,
club
of
and
course, yeah.
become assets for the football club. So it's more about the day to day and reviewing, assessing our methods and how we work. And the byproduct will take care of itself in terms of performance.
No, I mean, it seems also by by our conversation here, Steve. Particularly for your academy players, you're very, you kind of process driven, and that data driven as well. So, with that being said, then what does the assessment look like for an academy player when you? I don't know how many times in a season that you'll assess and what that assessment looks like in terms of sitting down with parents and the
Mhm.
player and saying, okay, the here's where we think you are. So just talk to us a little bit about what does that look like, that process.
Just bear with me. It's just getting a little bit dark. I'm just going to put the light on. 1 sec.
Right.
That's a bit better. Sorry, I wasn't running away. Yeah.
Don't worry, we've got an editor. He'll edit that out. Don't worry.
Oh, so okay, just so I'll click then, like the light came on. No, well, that formula, that what you've just described and asked about, really, that forms everything we do in terms of the way we work. And although we're process driven as an organisation, and when working with youth, you have to have consistency. It's like anything with children. We are also highly reliant on the experts. So a term that I like to use, which I think suits us well, is we are data informed and expertise led. So it's okay having the data and the information, but if you don't know what it is you're looking at and how to use it and apply it, we're all going to suffer.
Right.
So our sort of structure for the season is we start each season at the end of pre-season. We will sit down as a staff team and we'll discuss every individual player. We spend a minimum of 30 minutes to discuss every player. I mean, there's constant dialogue going on, as you can imagine, but we sit down and we streamline these meetings.
Well, that's,
And
sorry, Steve. I just so that parents here or just gets an understanding of that. So you're spending 30 minutes on every player, and is
yeah,
that from 8 years old to 16, or is that from 9 years old to 16?
that's from 8 years old through to 21.
Right. Okay. So we're talking a lot of players there and a lot of
Yeah,
hours you
that's
spend.
right.
Right.
So, but it's vital. So at the end of pre-season, once the teams have been inherited, we then sit and say, okay, how do we see them? Now we'll have already brought with us a plan from the previous season in most cases because the player will have been in our system. So if you imagine this is a ongoing cycle that would keep repeating and keep repeating. And at that point, what we also do is we give a review sheet to the player and the family, and we say, take this away at the same time. So at the same time we're doing it, they're doing it.
Mm,
And we ask the player then to share with us what they think, and we have the information that we think.
yeah.
And what we do is we create what's called a strengths and weaknesses matrix.
Right.
So in the top left corner, it's a 4-box matrix. In the
Yeah.
top left, we'd have current strengths. In the top right, we'd have future super strengths, and they're strengths that we think are gonna, or they think may get them into the highest level possible as a player into the Premier League.
Yeah.
In the bottom left, we'd have unacceptable weakness. Acceptable weakness, and in
Mm.
the bottom right, we'd have unacceptable weakness, and that word doesn't sit well with some people. But the reason we say that is because what the individual needs to think about is, I've got to eradicate this in order for me to continue to grow and to keep developing and to
So
keep
what's an
getting.
example of that that's unacceptable? So is that unacceptable for Brentford Football Club?
No, for the individual.
Right.
So
Okay.
let's say I'm a striker.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm a forward, and my shooting is really low at the moment. Because of my position, because of the type of player I am, if I'm not a goal scorer in that position, that's probably an unacceptable weakness for me longer term to help me
Got
get
you.
to the Premier League.
Sure.
Well, that's something that I've got to hold as high importance.
Mm.
Likewise, I could have 1v1 dribbling in my future super strengths category. So I'm a fantastic dribbler. I get past everybody all of the time, but when I get in front of goal, I don't hit the ball strong enough or accurately enough. So if I can enhance that dribbling to make it even better, and I can eradicate that shooting, that is going to help me to become a better forward in the future.
Right.
But I have to sit down and methodically think this through. And
Mm.
then from that plan, we would do the same as a staff team. You would do the same as a family. And then we get in a room for another 30 minutes and we co-create a plan. So we
Right.
would talk about it. We would not tell the player, we think you should work on shooting. We
Got you.
would ask and see what they say as well as us. Now, if they didn't have shooting in unacceptable weaknesses, as part of that discussion, we would share our thoughts on it and we would say, here's some data to support, here's some of our thinking.
Mm.
You know, like when you find yourself in front of goal, here's some clips because we video the games. Here's what we think. And, you know, when we see you in these situations, we think this is something that can improve in the future. And we're
Right.
all crystal clear. And before we move forward to execute that plan, we agree, we co-create. Otherwise, it's like your old teacher at school saying, I think you should do this. And you're sitting there thinking, I don't agree. So you never fully buy into it anyway.
Sure.
So the key bit is the meetings so that we take
Yeah.
our time and we methodically again plan together, co-create, and therefore we then look at what actions are we going to do together, who's the action owner, what
Mm.
is the player going to do individually with the family away from the club, and what are we going to do together? What can we provide? And we just work hand in hand
Right.
in order to develop.
So there's that triangular effect there, isn't there, in terms of coach, player, parents,
Yeah,
working together to try and get the best out of this child
That's
to
right.
hopefully make sure that their outcomes are as
And
reaching potential as much as.
yeah, and Jason, if I can just add one more thing, again, I'm thinking of the families here. When we first started to do this, you can imagine, depending on the age of the young boy, depends on the volume of the voice of the family.
Yep,
Now, we're talking to 9-year-olds. We would
of course.
expect that mum or dad or whoever's in the room to help. But ideally, that meeting should be with the staff team and the player. So the
Right.
louder the voice can come from the player, and it's his or her voice in the discussion, and it's the opinion and the views of the individual player, not the words of the family or
Mm,
the influential parent,
yeah.
the better. Because then they're gonna make ownership, they're gonna take ownership over this. And
Right.
then and we know the commitment is from the young person, and the sort of contracting and agreement that we have by writing this together is through the young person and not the influence of the family. Because we've done this at times where the family member has spoken and we said, "Excuse me, can we just stop? We'd like to hear from,"
Right. Yeah.
because we know it's their plan. It's
Right.
not ours. It's not the parents' plan. It's the player. It's the young person. It's their plan.
Right.
So we have to, and you can imagine that's taken us a bit of time to get
Yeah. Of
comfortable to
course.
do that. But
Of course.
it's coming from that caring place again that
Mm,
we want to work together, but we don't want to be false and fluffy in this and expect that, the voice has to come from a child. Now, obviously, if the child struggles with dialogue and interactions and communication, that's a totally different story. We
mm,
understand that. But when we get to 13 and 14 and these young people find their voice and they're really smart and they know what it is. I mean, I remember sitting in one meeting with a 10-year-old, and the maturity of the individual was through the roof. He's so talented, this boy. So he
right.
could hold the conversation, and dad just sat there listening. We're all
Right.
just nodding away. So you do
Yeah.
have these moments where that can happen, and I'm sure you've got some families on this call whose children are super bright, super smart.
Yeah.
They've had a very good upbringing and education, and they can hold some certain conversations.
Mm,
But then you will have some that are shy and a bit timid, and then they'll need a bit of a nudge. So it's finding that, like I said before, that path together that's different. But in these meetings, it's really important that we hear the voice of the individual in the young person.
yeah. No, I mean, so here's what's interesting to me now, Steve. So, I again, not in a bad way, but I do. I mean, you find it fascinating because obviously football's evolving over time, isn't it? And I've been away from England for a while, but at the same time, I've always touched points and dropped into academies. I understand how the processes work. But in each club probably a little bit different, aren't they? Want a bit unique, aren't they? And they want it to be that way, and that's fine.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in with what you're saying, though, Steve, is about you very much have the parents involved or the player involved in that assessment process. How does that manifest itself then into what happens on the training pitch? So you're talking about things that are individual to the player, and
Mhm.
that's fine. But then when it comes into your training environment now, what is it that you're doing in the training environment that's going to help that kind of, become a reality?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's part of the process. But then from that moment, once we have that, and everybody has an individual learning plan or individual development plan, sorry, our staff know that they want to highlight 3 priority areas. Now, some of them may be coaching football, some of them may be physical. So that will be out with our athletic development team. Some may be from a psychological perspective, where they're working on, self-awareness or bravery or communication or drive or something like that. And they would then be assigned somebody who's an action owner for their particular skill. So we try our best to have a 1 to 5 ratio of staff to player. So when we break off into our groups, we can do small group work within the practice so that we have people that are assigned to different individuals. And when our head coach designs the practice, they bring the full, we call it an IDT, interdisciplinary team. So we bring everybody together. They're all full-time staff. They sit and they focus and they plan practices together, and they interlink the learning that they need for these individuals. So if I was assigned to you, Jason, and the head coach was planning, and he said, right, today I'm going to do this finishing exercise because I think Jason needs it. And what we're going to do is going to make it very intense. And you had an individual plan that had something around, relieving stress because you're quite anxious at the moment. I would raise my voice and say, that practice is great, but I don't think it would be good to make it really intense for him right now, because what we're working on is him remaining calm and composed. And I would then have to come up with a solution to tweak that and fine tune that practice for you. And that's going on all across the practice.
Right. So there's an overarching theme of a practice,
That's
but
right.
then within that, you've got these different professionals, if you like,
Yeah.
within in that help into the developing that actual practice or that
Yeah.
session. So
Yeah, and an overall practice might be made up of 5 or 6 parts. So, part 1 may be ideal for you, part 2 may be perfect for me, but you're still learning about the game, because in
yeah,
part 2, you're still involved in
yeah,
that.
of course.
But it's not designed around you, it's designed around me, and then that differs for player to player. And
Right,
then overarching sort of framework, that would mean that we teach age appropriately the content required to build the player, the young person who becomes the player.
right. Mm,
And then from that, we would take out individual areas and add more in for one, take more out for another. And
right,
one of those sections would be IDT time, individual development time, where they all break off into their own little zones, and they'll do 20
right.
minutes each session of that.
I mean, that's fantastic. I can only imagine how many how many staff, how many full-time staff do you have, Steve?
So as an academy now, we're 70 full-time staff across all of our ages. All of our coaches are full-time staff members.
Right,
We believe that with this level of planning and detail that goes into it, they have to have time to plan, and they have to have time to prepare for their practices, because they may come in the evenings, the boys, but a lot of the prep time in the mornings and the afternoons, in order to do that and make sure that that practice is so well planned and detailed. You can't do that as a part-time coach coming from another job and
no.
driving it. You just cannot deliver it to the standard that we would like. So it was a big decision from our point of view to have full-time staff members. And again, we have a number of different coaches. Some do overlap age groups depending on the schedule, but majority of them just work in a singular sort of merged age bracket. So our head coach for the under nines and tens just does that job.
So I'm assuming this is kind of like a- I mean, we had the chat last week, with our webinar with Nick Marshall, who you know very well at Liverpool,
Mhm.
and Nick says about Liverpool, and I'm pretty sure you're probably doing this. It seems as though, are we going away? Or say we, are the football academies kind of starting to get away from that kind of rigid curriculum, as it were, in terms of this is what we want you to deliver tonight? Or is it more like, okay, we've got some themes or some pillars that we want to make sure that our players have, and around that we want you to deliver what's specific to that age group, or what's specific to the talent level that you have in that group? Is that what's happening at Brentford as well?
Um, it, No, I don't think for us it is coming away from that. I think that the term, again, that's quite easy for me to explain this, and we talk to coaches about it all the time, is we provide the framework. So the
Right,
structure and the framework and the scaffolding is really important, because
right.
we need to make sure that the delivery of the content is
Hmm.
age appropriate and required for what is tried and tested to develop youth players of today.
Right.
What we can't do is leave that open to a coach, because again, if you give me absolute freedom, I will just do the things I'm good at. I'll
Right.
deliver the things that I like to do
Yeah.
from what I played, which I enjoyed, and I can
Yeah.
demonstrate quite well. And actually,
Yeah.
that keeps me pretty one-dimensional as a coach as well, because I haven't learned the other side of the game that I've got weaknesses in.
Sure.
So by having this curriculum and this process each week, and you follow it, and that framework, what they do have is freedom and autonomy within the framework to
Got
deliver
you.
it to their
Yeah.
way and how they deem fit for their player. Now, it isn't rigid, then we're like, they've got to do it to the minute. And if
Yeah.
you do that, you're in trouble, because we need the skill of the deliverer and the experience of that coach and that team to be able to maneuver it the way they see fit for the individuals. So the easiest way of saying it is it's freedom within a framework.
Yeah.
Framework is there, it's age appropriate, but the coaches have freedom and autonomy on how they design practices. So we'll have some best practice examples as a reference, but we don't have a playbook where they follow it. Like we never ever provide them with the practices and say, "Oh, for this part of the topic, deliver this," because
Yeah.
we want them to have their own style and freedom within teaching.
Well, I mean, and to be honest, that's why you get your qualifications, don't you? You know, so you should be able to, you should be able to deliver that. But yeah, I know that's, that's brilliant. So just changing gears a little bit, or when I say change gears, or just kind of moving on from, we've talked about that kind of, philosophy that you have at Brentford. We talked about, your assessment process, and, your training and delivery, if you like. Um, what's the recruitment like now then, at Brentford? So again, you've obviously you've got all this in place with regards to the data and the processes you want doing, but obviously there's a part where you're recruiting players to come into your building, aren't you?
That's
So
right.
what does that recruitment process look like, and what kind of players are you looking for when they're actually, or what are you measuring them against in terms of, that this is the kind of player we want coming into our building?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, an easy way to look at it is we look at performance and potential.
Right,
So performance would be how is an individual performing against their peers at this moment? So if they play in the games and then we'd look at them like, do they stand out? And then we'll ask ourselves why. So some will stand out for different reasons. Um, we would then look at potential, and we look at some indicators of potential. So we look at technical competency, we look at
right,
physical athletic potential, we would look at sort of your mental skills and that area of psychology, and are they working well in there, and then we'll look at game intelligence. So if you just use those four things as indicators for potential, what you can do as a scout if you go out there is you might say, well, Stephen's got really high level in all four of those. That shows us now if we looked at performance, there's a good chance with all four of those being really high that the performance is going to be high.
right.
You could sometimes see somebody that's got one of them. So say athletic development, where it's like an Olympic sprinter with real speed, but quite raw and low techniques and lack of game intelligence, but a really good capacity to learn because of the social and psychological sort of makeup. The performance might be inconsistent, but the potential is high in those
Mm,
two areas. So we would entertain that. We would look at players like that because we know that we can improve technique and we know that we can improve game understanding. And we would look at all these indicators, and every sort of makeup of a young player that comes into our system may look a little bit different.
right,
But we need to know that there's potential there. And there's
right.
potential in these indicators. Something has to jump out the page at us. And it may just be one of those. It may not be all four.
Mm,
If we've got that and we've got the gaps and we think we've got opportunities to help them develop, then that'll be somebody that we'll take serious in terms of looking at
right.
joining our club.
Interesting. Just quickly, so would you say one common denominator then, Steve, in terms of your player recruitment when you're looking at it? I hate to say it this, but I do see it a little bit. It does seem to be happening. Is the common denominator being that physical element in terms of movement? Do you have to? Is it one of those when you're looking at a player, they have to be able to move, and that doesn't mean to say they have to be lightning quick, but they need to have that agility or that coordination to move around the pitch.
Um, the answer to that for me is it depends. So, and it's to what level.
Right.
So, if you're a holding midfielder, you don't need the same physical attributes as a
Sure.
winger.
Right.
Well, it depends then on what skills you have. So if you've got the skills of a winger, but haven't got the athletic potential of a winger, then can you adapt your game? And can you be intelligent enough to play in a different area of the field where
Mm,
all of these things can then click together?
right.
So I don't want to say that I wouldn't want to answer yes to your question, because the answer is it depends, and it depends on many factors. Because physical can be speed, it can be agility, it can be strength, power, and then they would lend them. Each one of them lends themselves to a different area of the field. Now, if you have all of them, of course you're in a better
Yeah,
position.
of
But you
course.
could also have unbelievable techniques. You could have the best mentality. You could be the most game smart, but you could lack maybe that foot speed. But if you solve problems in a way that some do, then you'll be able to perform. So it depends on how the combinations fit together,
Of course.
depending on a number of factors.
Course, that impacts in the game, as isn't it? And if they can do that, so Steve, we do almost we do. I don't, we've got an hour or so here, so I really want to make sure that we're giving our parents as much information as possible.
Mhm.
Just another piece around the recruitment. We have a lot of parents on our call. Obviously, we're on an island here where, it's lots of immigrants from the UK, British passports, etc. And I just wondered if you could maybe just talk to us a little bit about that recruitment process that happens for an international player. We talked about it a little bit last week I'd say with Nick from Liverpool FC, but
Mhm.
there's lots of different should we say things that are out there in terms of how it goes around. Can you tell me about what's the recruitment process like, for you at Brentford? I mean, it will be the same for everybody, but
Yeah.
also what's that recruitment like for a family that's coming over for educational purposes, so they want their kid to go to a certain school or whatever it is. What would be the process then for that player or that kid within that family?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my job is not recruitment, so I don't know every single rule,
Right.
from the Premier League. But I'll try and answer it as open as honestly as I can from my experiences. Um, Ultimately, we're under FIFA and UEFA sort of ruling. So depending on where you are in the world, the rules are a certain thing. And in terms of entering the club for footballing purposes, that is a huge no-no up until a certain age. I think that's under 18s. So now we're not in the EU any longer. European players cannot join us until the age of 18 because they become now in the rest of the world, and a lot's changed there from us not being in the EU as a country. So what it means is, yes, of course, if you have a British passport and you live as a family in the UK, then that changes things dependent on the age of the boy and dependent on the location of where you are. So if you are 12 years and below, you would have to live within 60-minute drive of our academy in order to be eligible to sign for our academy. However, what we couldn't do is we couldn't, for example, trial one of your players now, Jason. When say one of your boys, you tell me he's super talented, he's the next Lionel Messi, Ronaldo, Pele,
Right.
Maradona rolled into one. Of course, that would make our ears prick because we know there'd be a number of those indicators of potential for you, or you wouldn't be saying it. However, it would simply be we couldn't do anything with that because the boy you're talking about lives in the Cayman Islands. However, if you're telling me about a player and a young family that are moving to the UK because their parent is moving for work, or their child is going to study in that country, then once they've been in the country for a period of time and they were registered, or and this is the easiest way to register with a junior football grassroots team because they would like to continue their playing sort of development, then our scouting team could go and watch that player in that environment, and therefore after that they could start that process of recruitment into our academy. But we couldn't and shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't discuss that as an option beforehand because it's just not legal, and it's not something that we would be able to do. And FIFA would track that and go back to see what the evidence would suggest over years and years and years. I think you told me that Nick had mentioned this before.
Right.
So, um, do we have young people in our academy that didn't live in the UK all their life? Yes, we do. But we had absolutely nothing to do with how they ended up being back in the country. Their parents will have changed jobs or moved jobs for different reasons or educational purposes. And therefore our scouting team go out into the grassroots community. They would watch these players, they would scout these players, and they would bring them in like they would bring in any other local player.
Got you.
And from that moment, then it's down to the ability of the individual and the setup of why they're in the country, and then you'd need evidence to support why you're in this country. So FIFA would look at, you know, the contract of the family member who's moved to the country and why they were working in this part of the world, for example. And they would ask, and they would ask some pretty interesting questions because they'd want to prove that it wasn't for non-footballing reasons that you were in the country.
Right. Okay, that's that's a comprehensive answer. That hopefully people and parents understand that, and if any parents have any further questions about that, I can break that down even further for them if they want to after.
I suppose
after
one other bit is that it is less intrusive if you are a UK passport holder,
sure.
because that is your previous
Thank you.
place of heritage or birth, and you've got
Of
family
course.
connections there. So that is a bit less,
Mm,
but it would still require, for the reasons of the son, and also if your boy had been registered in um, in the other country with another football club, then that registration will be logged somewhere with FIFA. So there will be there will be international clearance required for that young person to play.
right. Right. Okay. No, brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Just a couple more things, and like I say, we'll let you go. Um, Obviously we've already talked a lot, haven't we, about what goes into an academy player, and there's obviously a lot of detail and a lot of support that these players get. Um, how do you as a club kind of help them kind of balance that thing around, because they're still children, aren't they? They're still
Yeah.
going to school. How do you balance them between obviously football and then obviously their academics, because obviously that's important, isn't it? Try to get the balance between both. How do you do that? As an organization.
Well, it comes back to caring straight away. So this is why our purpose is so crucial to what we do. So we know we can't guarantee everybody to be successful. So what we can't have is our young players hindering their education
Right.
for the sake of that. And we made a big call, and we're the only club to do this in the UK, is that we actually encourage our under 12s and below to continue to play with their grassroots team. We actually openly encourage it. Now that can be either grassroots football, or it can be, and I know there's a question in the chat that probably relates to this around academics and also multi-sports.
Sure.
So we also encourage, as part of that individual plan, the playing of donor sports that could link and actually complement the growth and development of an individual. But
Mm,
we actually reduce our training nights into the conventional sort of modern club. Not the right way of putting it, really, but for majority of clubs, they would train longer. They would train more than we do.
right.
So our training program at the moment for our 9s to 12s, they train twice in the week and have a
Mm,
game on the weekend. So we
right.
create those opportunities in the week. They train Tuesdays and Thursdays. We create Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for them to play these extra sports, to go and play with their grassroots team, for them to continue their academics and make sure that they're strong and they don't feel like they're falling behind. Because we
Right.
know if we start too early and we have early elitism, that could be a factor going forward.
Yeah.
When we go to our under 13s and 14s, we add one more training night, so they go to 3 nights. At 15s and 16s, we add another training night. So by the time they're 14, by the 15 and 16 years of age, they train 4 nights a week with us, which is
Right.
closer to what our under 18s would do. So physically, their load is getting greater, and they're getting closer and closer. And the other thing is, obviously, we know if they're closer to becoming a professional player at that time. So we can take it a little bit more serious and a little bit more in depth at that point. But from
Right.
12s and below, we make it very playful, very relaxed. If people can't join for training, no problem. Like we've got one of our under 18s, for example. I've literally just had an email there from one of our staff members saying, this boy is not available for selection from now until the end of the season because he's studying for his exams, and we're making that a priority. Now, this boy's a 17-year-old boy, and he's studying a international baccalaureate. So he's studying at a very high level, and we want to support him on that journey. So he's not going to train or play until he feels like he's ready to cut and caught up with that. And this is just individual decisions that we make in order to support our people, because he needs it. He wants it. It's important to him. For the
Right.
sake of not training for 1 week or playing for 1 week, but he feels more equipped for his exams.
Mm.
That's important. And the other thing that we do, which the sort of overarching piece here that I think is important to share is we look at prolonging childhoods as much as we possibly can, because in elite sport, it's very difficult. Now, we know that the work has to be done. We know that the training has to be intense, and we know that has to be done to a high level. But there is no evidence whatsoever and research out there that says if I train one more practice a week than you, Jason, that I'm going to be better than you. There's no factual evidence to support that, because I might be relaxed in those all of my training sessions, and you work intensely in your too.
Mm.
So there's a lot of other variables in this. Now, I don't think we could get away with doing nothing. Obviously, that's not what we're
Of
saying. But at the
course.
same time, it's different for different people, and it's how you apply yourself to it. So, of course, there's theories around 10,000 hours, and there's all these type of things. But there's more than one way to do this, and it has to fit in with the individual and the family and everything else that goes around it.
So, so obviously, in terms of your training model there, there's obviously a social and emotional piece to it, isn't it? In terms of, you want your kids to still be playing with their friends, as it were, you know,
Absolutely.
until they're 12 years old, because we obviously know what happens is, you have these 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds that used to happen, and I'm sure you probably some clubs still do it, don't they? They don't allow them to play in the grassroots team once they've actually signed with a professional club. Then all of a
Yeah,
sudden they're seen as, I'm not going to quite say an outcast at school, but they're seen as somebody different, aren't they?
that's right. And I think we all know the answer to this, but we've got caught in the system taking us down a certain direction. And as like I say, as a parent who's got a child who's been in the system, or a stepchild that's in the system, or if I had my chance again, I would want to play with my friends, because even when I was a professional at 19, it didn't guarantee me a career in the game. But I know the sacrifices, and we have those sacrifices. It's just how big is that sacrifice, and how big does it need to be, and how important is it at a certain age? Now, people may differ on that, but that's my personal view, that we feel more responsible and ethical in our decisions right now. To not treat these young people like professionals from the age of 8. They're not.
Yeah, I mean, listen, people on this call, that they'll hear me say this all the time, and there's plenty of time for it to get serious. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
There's plenty of time for that. And the last thing you want it to be coming is to look like it's your job already, and you're not even getting paid. So,
Well, Jason, that mine the story I always say all the time on this one is I love a nice ribeye steak. I really do like it. But if I'd been eating that since I was 8 years of age, every 5 times a week till I was 18, and someone put one in front of me, I'd probably not want to eat it. So
Right.
you've got to really enjoy the thing you love the most, and you can
Mm.
do that sometimes with a bit of absence, like not having it for a bit. It keeps you wanting it more. So if we give everything at once, it could cause us more issues. There's research around psychological burnout, physical burnout. There's lots of things out there around early elitism that are detrimental, but at the same time, we're conscious of it and knowing of it, and we have to find the push and the pull in it, and the drip feeding it in when we feel it's ready, when people are ready for it or they need it. And actually, before the peak height velocity, before the growth spurt, we really do not know what physical sort of adult individual athletic sort of potential we're going to have. So when we do it earlier, we could really be barking up the wrong tree here, and we don't
Mm.
know. So we've got a responsibility, in my view, to take our time, be more cautious, have fun with it, play with it. And when they're in our care, like we've talked about, no, then we do it to the elite level, the highest possible standards. But we don't have to do it every minute of every day, because in the end, that could take its toll, and we need to be more cautious in that approach.
Sure. Well, listen, just to finish it off then, and this is one of the questions that I'll probably ask all the time. because I'm really conscious of about parents' involvement. And I think you've already alluded to how much parents are important in this. But what would be the one thing that you want to leave parents with today, Steve, with regards to, player development, in terms of being at a professional academy? What would be the lasting thought you would have for them?
Um, lasting thought. Everyone's going to say have fun, right? Everyone's going to say, if you ever ask that question to every single person, they're going to say you've got to enjoy the journey, you've got to enjoy it, and your son's got to enjoy it, and that is true. And I think you can do that with managing expectations. So the way I manage expectations is this. So this is my final thought then for you.
Mm,
Um, all of your families here, especially the English parents, they may have played the snakes and ladders when you were younger. Like we've all played the board game, or
mm,
shoots and ladders, I think it's called in America.
mm,
So my advice to everybody, and I did exactly the same this morning for our under 8 parents, so it's popped into my mind really easily, is from the moment your child starts to play, if they've got aspirations to be in the elite system, you start playing that game of football, snakes and ladders immediately. So every time your son kicks the ball or trains or runs and plays, they roll the dice. And sometimes it's good. Something happens. You win a tournament. They play really well. They go up the chute. A scout looks at them or says nice things about them. They feel great and they're continuing to play and go up this ladder. But then there are the moments when you roll the dice and maybe you pick up an injury or you get a rejection and you feel like you're going down the snake. But that's not the end of the game. The game only finishes when you stop finishing playing in the end, because it just feels and looks differently. You get close to retirement, and then it's the young player who's taking your shirt, and then you feel like you're on the snake again on the way down, but you've had a career for 20 years. It's the same thing going on all the time. You're at the end of your contract and you need a renewal and you want to feed your family for a bit longer and you support all these. It's always going on. It just feels and looks differently depending on where you're at. So my advice would be enjoy the game, play the game, recognize that you're there to support your son along that journey. Don't get too high, don't get too low. Things are going to happen that are going to test you all the way through this. But your calmness for your son or daughter is going to help them play this game better. So please try and manage your expectations, enjoy the what you're doing, and just simply encourage your child for working hard and having fun. And that'll give them the best possible and care for them, and that'll give them the best possible chance to perform to the best of their ability.
well, couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much, Steve, for your time today. I know we've gone a little bit over our hour, but I just think some of the information that you're giving is so insightful and so important for our parents. I can't thank you enough for your time. What I would say though is that if I had my time again with my kids again, my kids being smaller again, I'd like them to play at Brentford Football Club. Put it that way. So
Well, that's good. That's all I needed to hear.
don't
That is
worry.
all
So
I needed to
kudos
hear.
to you, mate, and all the best in everything that you're doing at that club. And I think they're obviously very fortunate to have you there at Brentford FC. So no doubt we'll talk soon anyway, Steve. But again, thank you very much for your time.
Anytime. Thanks very much. Really appreciated it and enjoyed it.
Brilliant,
Thank you.
brilliant. So thank you, parents, as well. Thank you for spending the time with us this afternoon. We'll have another parent webinar coming up soon, which will be the third in our series. Please watch out for look at our website and also our Instagram page, and we look forward to seeing you all again. All right, thanks very much, and thanks again to you, Steve.